Morning, good afternoon. I'm so thrilled to see so many people here. This is very exciting and happy almost International Women's Day. What a time to celebrate. We're so excited to be with you all. Um, there are still people joining, and this will be recorded, so feel free to join when you can, or if you have to get up and get a cup of coffee. We'll still be here and just really excited to be part of this project today. For those of you that don't know me, my name is Paula Kweskin, and I'm a human rights lawyer and filmmaker. I'm the co-founder and director of the 49%. We are a nonprofit organization dedicated to telling the world's most urgent women's rights stories in order to create a more peaceful and prosperous world. And we love gathering women from all over the world and to share our stories and to push the envelope, especially as it relates to international women's rights and the international world order. Um, we believe especially that women's voices are essential in creating a more moderate and democratic world. And we focus a lot of our efforts in this region in the Middle East. I'm joining you today from right outside Tel Aviv, and I'm really grateful to be here. And um, I obviously know there's a lot of weight to the webinar today. I'm joined by some phenomenal women. We actually planned this webinar several weeks ago, and we decided not to cancel. International Women's Day is our favorite day of the year. I'm sure you can understand why. And it was really important for us to still gather here today. Um, Especially because I think now more than ever, women's voices need to be heard from the region. It's incredibly important that women are given a platform as the region is changing so very quickly. I, of course, want to acknowledge the political controversies that accompany every part of the Middle East, especially what's happening right now. We're probably not going to go into too much of the controversy today surrounding the current military escalation in the region and the changing all the time. Please feel free to ask questions, but I just want to ground us in the fact that we're not so much looking at the politics, but rather we want to center the experiences of women and discuss the path forward for women in the region. Still, there's no topic that's off limits, so please feel free to ask whatever's on your mind. And I think just on a personal note, I mean, it's quite surreal to be sitting here with you and my other sisters at the table. I want to give a shout out and deep appreciation to my co-founder and COO of the 49%, Dana Wilsey. She's here as well. If anything technical comes up, you can shoot her a quick chat. I'm just so grateful to be in a room, albeit virtual, with all of you. And like I said, here we are sitting in yet another historic time. I think the history is just happening so fast. But I want to ground us in this moment that right now, two of the worst women's rights abusers in the entire world, Iran, the Iranian regime, and the Taliban in Afghanistan are both under attack. There's two separate military exercises happening right now, two big operations happening right now. Pakistan has attacked Afghanistan, and of course, we know what's happening right now in Iran and throughout the region. But I think it's very interesting that these two entities, these two regimes are under attack. And of course, these regimes represent what we often call gender apartheid, where we're in a situation where women are treated as second or third class citizens. They have been completely stripped of their rights. And I have to tell you that I'm feeling incredibly optimistic today. I'm very hopeful, but what I see is a toppling, I hope, for these regimes and a path forward for a more peaceful and prosperous Middle East. I'm heartened by the cooperation between the Gulf states and the allies in the region. And I'm very proud to watch my sisters all over the region who are demanding their rights, especially as we face an unknown tomorrow. Um, so thank you again for being here. Let me just go through a couple of housekeeping things. I'll be speaking with three incredible women. I'll introduce them in a moment. And what I'll do is facilitate the conversation to make sure that we hear from everyone. Later, we'll have time for Q&A. If you want to ask a question, just go to the Q&A button at the bottom of your screen. You can submit your question and then click close to make sure you come back to the webinar video. Only the panelists will receive your questions. It won't be seen by everybody else. And that's another thing. You can't see other participants because we're in a webinar format. So don't despair if all you're seeing is us. And on that note, let me go ahead and get started introducing our speakers today. Raheel Raza is a Canadian journalist, author, and human rights activist known for her advocacy on behalf of Muslim reform, women's rights, and secular democracy. She's the founder of the Council for Muslims Facing Tomorrow, and she frequently speaks internationally about pluralism, religious reform, and the protection of human rights. She's written several books and contributes regularly to global media. Next, we have Nazanin Afshinjam, an Iranian-Canadian human rights advocate and author who has spent nearly 2 decades campaigning for democracy and women's rights in Iran. Nazanin, thank you especially for being here today. I know you've been working around the clock and interviewing. She gained international recognition for leading a global campaign that helped stop the execution of a young Iranian woman in 2006. She is the co-founder of Stop Child Executions and has worked with governments and NGOs worldwide to advance human rights. And finally, Astrid Hajar is a Lebanese human rights advocate, lawyer, and civil activist focused on women's rights, democratic reform, and interfaith dialogue in the Middle East. She works very much with the Empower Women Media, and she's the co-founder of the Abraham Women's Alliance. She's been involved in civil society initiatives promoting pluralism, freedom of expression, and youth engagement, and she frequently participates in international forums addressing the future of democracy and human rights in the Middle East. I'm going to turn it over to Raheel Raza now, who's going to set the stage for this important moment. Raheel, turning it over to you.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Paula. I'm so honored to be here today to join 3 very special women in thoughtful dialogue about the current conflict and its impact on women on the ground. At a time when rhetoric is polarized and dehumanizing, the presence of these wonderful women reminds us of something radical. Women can hold complexity. Women can disagree without erasing each other. Women can insist on security and dignity for their own people while recognizing the humanity of the other. So this isn't just another panel. And thank you, Paula, for hosting this. It's an inside look at the women shaping the future of their societies, often quietly, often bravely, always persistently. Now, with International Women's Day coming up, we celebrate resilience and empowerment. But empowerment can't be selective. We can't champion women's rights at home while averting our gaze from women imprisoned, violated, and executed abroad, as has been the history of so-called feminist groups. But the women who are out there, these women, they are so brave. True bravery is not found in missiles or martyrdom narratives. It's found in the Iranian girls who removed their hijabs in defiance. It is in the mothers who demand justice for executed sons. It's in the journalists who continue to write under threat of imprisonment. And every woman in Tehran, in Toronto, in exile, who refuses to be silent. And across the Middle East, women are not waiting for permission. From the streets of Tehran to universities in Riyadh, to movements in Lebanon, to civil society initiatives in Israel, women are pushing boundaries, disrupting entrenched systems, and challenging power structures, often at a profound personal risk. Speaking of personal risk, I have a personal connection here, as 3 Canadian women have been targeted by the IRGC in recent months, and we in Canada are living under a threat warning. An ex-politician, Goldie Kamari, Iraqi-born Canadian Yanar Mohammed, who was shot in Iraq, and me. We have all been under threat. So what does this say about, the way our governments are dealing with this? And what does this say about wanting to silence us? But the real trends shaping women's rights now are complex and sometimes they're contradictory. On the one hand, we are witnessing unprecedented visibility. Women are leading businesses, entering parliaments, excelling in technology and media, and mobilizing through digital platforms that transcend borders. Young women are getting educated, they're connected, politically aware, and unwilling to inherit silence. But on the other hand, we see a backlash. Authoritarianism is tightening its grip in several states. Laws regulating dress, mobility, family status, and speech are being weaponized. Conflict, whether in Gaza, southern Lebanon, or Afghanistan, disproportionately affects women, not only as victims of violence, but as caretakers, breadwinners, and community stabilizers in times of chaos. And the biggest obstacles are structural legal inequality embedded in personal status laws. Paula just mentioned the Taliban. Under the Taliban's newly approved criminal courts procedure in 2026, injustice is no longer arbitrary. It's institutionalized. So, where are we at in 2026? Furthermore, the fusion of religion and state power, economic exclusion, normalization of harassment and intimidation for women who speak publicly, and the chilling effect of imprisonment, exile, social ostracism. I know, I've lived through it, and it becomes clear why courage is the currency of reform. And yet, hope persists. Women across the region are reframing power. Hope is embedded in the women who are here today and the women who are putting their lives at stake to bring about change. They're not merely demanding inclusion within broken systems. They are reimagining those systems. They're advocating for reforms in guardianship laws, challenging discriminatory inheritance codes, demanding accountability for gender-based violence, and creating parallel spaces, from independent media to underground networks where truth can survive. Thank you, Paula.
Wow, Raheel, that was beautiful. Thank you so much. I grabbed a pen and paper and wrote, "Courage is the currency of reform." I love that. I want a t-shirt. You're going to be hearing that more from us. Thank you so
Okay.
much. Beautiful words as always. I'm going to turn it now just to some questions to the other folks here. Nazanin, we're going to start with you, of course, with your role in the Iranian diaspora and also as a dissident. What does this current war and crisis mean for women's rights? And also, if you can please delineate some of the women's rights abuses that have been taking place in Iran over the last 40 years.
Sure, Paula. Thank you very much, Paula, Dana, for gathering us all here today. And it's wonderful seeing friends from different spaces and times. You've really helped shape such kinds of sisterhood among women champions of change over decades. So thank you to the 49%. My heroes and the most courageous people I have ever encountered in my life are the brave Iranian women and men who have stood up to tyranny with bare hands against a heavily armed regime unafraid to kill its own people in order to remain in power. The real war that you speak about, Paula, that we're talking about, isn't the one the US and Israel waged on Iran, but by the regime on its own people. And Iranian women prove time and time again that they are willing to pay a heavy price for freedom. They're willing to sacrifice their security and even lives for an end to this gender apartheid regime that has sucked the oxygen out of their bodies, but not their spirit. For 47 years, this regime has oppressed them and treated them as second-class citizens, where their life is valued as half of a man under the law, where their testimony in court is worth half of a man's. In a new Iran, they will have full agency and rights. Under this regime, women are forced to wear a hijab. In a new Iran, they will have full bodily autonomy to make the choice themselves. Right now, it's illegal for them to publicly sing, dance, ride a bicycle, or even enter a stadium. They even need permission from their male relative to travel or get a passport. In a new Iran, women will have their independence once again. In a new Iran, they will have the chance to be heard, they'll be chance to be heads of state as president, prime minister, or constitutional monarch. That will be up to the Iranian people. So I want people to understand this. While Iranians are not naive to think that this war is sparked by altruism, they understand that the US and Israel have their own national self-interest. But this military intervention by the United States and Israel is actually helping freedom-loving Iranians with their own campaign of liberation. These forces are surgically targeting IRGC command and control centers. They're eliminating the terrorists that have oppressed the Iranian people for decades. And by weakening the regime, they are actually giving the Iranian people and women a fighting chance to free themselves. I'll stop there and we can continue the conversation in a bit.
Thank you, Nazanin. Yeah, I really appreciate your words. I think that it's really powerful to delineate that there has been decades of actions by women in Iran. This isn't something new, that this isn't something that started with Women Life Freedom. This isn't something that started, with the Green Revolution. This has been something that from day one, women in Iran have been pushing back and speaking up. And as you said, with risking their lives, risking their families' lives, and just we can see by many famous dissidents and the not so famous ones who have emerged as leaders over and over. So I think that's an incredibly important point. And I, for one, am again deeply optimistic to see a new Iran, and also to see women finally taking the political space that they deserve in their country. Astrid, let me turn to you. I want to ask you, where do you see women's voices in the Middle East changing reality? And also, where do you see them currently being left behind?
Thank you, Paula, for that question. And thank you, Dana, for bringing us all together. Rahil, Nazanin, it is so wonderful to hear with the two of you. It's hard for us to get together in person, but thank you, Paula, for making this possible. If you allow me, Paula, I had made prepare some remarks for this important question, but I would like to recognize a group of women that are currently stuck at the airport in Qatar, women that had the intention to attend our conference in Malta. And because of the start of the war, they are still, some of the women that were supposed to attend our summit in Malta were not able to attend. And even though the war has started, 50 women and men attended our conference in Malta. So thank you. God bless them. They're true profiles and courage, each one of them. So having said that, Paula, to answer your question, women's voices in the Middle East are currently reshaping reality from top-down legal reforms to grassroots activism, which is what we're doing today with the organization, the 49%, with the work that Nazanin is doing and Rahil is doing as well. But yet they have been left behind by this conflict, systemic authoritarianism, and the legal discrimination. My background is legal. I'm an attorney, and to me, what I've witnessed the most throughout my travels through the Middle East is that women cannot truly achieve equality in society, in politics, in every segment of society without a legal transformation. There has to be legal activism as well. So women in the region are not passive victims. We've seen that in Iran. We've seen that throughout the Middle East, Lebanon, Afghanistan, everywhere. They're actively altering the social and political landscape through education, through entrepreneurship and digital activism, which is more or less what we do with Empower Women Media. And the most prominent example of this is what we're seeing in Malta, where we're in the middle of the war, and these women have the courage to still travel and get together and discuss the issues. So in the instance of political and legal breakthroughs, I'd like to pinpoint the example and mention the example of the Emirates. The UAE has set a regional benchmark for women comprising 50% of the Federal National Council and implementing laws mandating equal pay. High literacy rates, which is over 95%, it is remarkable. And female university graduates outnumber men and are translating into a more robust female workforce. Now, I had the chance to go to Saudi Arabia a couple of years ago. I visited different cities in Saudi Arabia, and I was very surprised with what I saw. There's still a lot of work to be done, but in Saudi Arabia, I have seen a rapid state-led transformation, the lifting of the driving ban, and then dismantling of significant male guardianship restrictions, such as allowing women to travel abroad without permission, which is was badly needed. They also have raised female labor force participation from 20% to over 35% in just a few years. I was impressed by the number of young people in Saudi Arabia. There's an immense young generation that is going to take over Saudi Arabia, and I believe the MBS and the Saudi leaders realize that they have to train and cultivate this new generation. Now, activism as a force of accountability. I mean, Iran. What better example that the Woman Life Freedom Movement in Iran is sparked by the death of Mahsa Amini. It demonstrated the power of women to lead mass political against authoritarianism, a mass political movement against authoritarianism, challenging the regime's legitimacy on the global stage. The courage that these women show in Iran was just remarkable. And I have to also mention the men, because some of the men, the husbands, the fathers, the brothers of the sons of these women were part of the movement as well. So we cannot leave the men out in that respect. Now, I have to mention digital journalism, because this is something that we do with media. Women journalists and activists such as Bisan Auda in Gaza and Lina Ben Hani in Tunisia historically have used social media to bypass state censorship, documenting human rights abuses and mobilizing global solidarity. There's so many examples, but not everything is peach and roses here. There's women have left behind extensively in the Middle East. You mentioned, Paula, earlier Afghanistan. The Afghan women are facing the world's most severe regression in rights from a legal point of view, not even legal, from any point of view. Since the Taliban's return, women have been erased from public life, banned from secondary education, from most employment. They cannot even walk on the streets, and banned from public parks, in a system described by the UN experts as a gender apartheid. I think it's more than that. Now, in the toll of conflict in Gaza, Sudan, Yemen, and Syria, women in these conflict zones bear disproportionate burden, facing displacement and starvation and targeted sexual violence as well. And it goes on and on and on. There's systemic legal discrimination throughout the Middle East. I'd just like to mention a case when we hosted a conference in Marrakesh. One of the Moroccan ladies, business owner, came to me and said, I divorced. And here, when you divorce as a woman, you have absolutely no rights. You can never remarry. You can never have a business again. There are a lot of restrictions for women that decide to divorce or are divorced by their husbands in several places in the Middle East. But I could go on and on and on. So I'll give you the word now, because to give a chance for people to ask their questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Astrid. No, I'm so glad you brought those concrete examples. I think that's incredibly important. I want to seize on something you said that was incredibly crucial, which is the idea that as a lawyer yourself, you see the rule of law as being fundamental to ensuring that women have rights. And there are certain legal protections in many Middle Eastern countries. Some of them are more robust than others. But there are some protections for women that have been pushed. In fact, some Middle Eastern countries have even signed CEDAW, the international binding agreement, which promotes the status of women. However, what I would draw attention to, and this leads me to my question to Raheel, is that I don't believe that the West is doing a good enough job of demanding action and accountability, especially when these laws exist, especially when countries have signed on to CEDAW or have certain albeit new laws protecting women's rights and equality in various countries around the region. So that's something that I've been very disappointed in. Raheel, I wanted to turn and ask you, how should women in the West, in North America, South America, Europe, et cetera, support the current struggles of women in the Middle East?
I think the most important thing that we can do is not remain silent. And this I learned from you, Paula, 25 years ago when we made Honor Diaries, that we have to be the voice for the voiceless. And, we have to shake and wake up these so-called women rights groups, our governments, our leaders. And I agree with Astrid that this has to be embedded in policy, because for every 10 steps women take climbing the ladder to success and activism, there are people who pull them back down to the lowest rung. And today, even in 2026, the examples of FGM, female genital mutilation, taking place in Somalia and in North America and in UK and Europe is growing by the day. How did we allow this to happen? So we have to ask ourselves some tough questions. Secondly, we need to resist simplification. The Middle East is not a monolith, and we know that, and its women are not passive victims. And this is something I feel very strongly about, that these women are not victims waiting to be saved. We need to listen to local voices. We need to support grassroots organizations and not just headline campaigns. We thirdly need those of us who live in democracies, who are fortunate to live in a country like Canada, we need to use our political power, advocate for foreign policies that prioritize human rights consistently. And our organization, and we have been doing that for decades, where we say that large amounts of money that is given to these countries, like Afghanistan and Pakistan, should be incumbent on women's education and human rights. We need to push governments to condition aid on measurable progress in women's rights, legal equality, and demand asylum protections for women activists at risk. Fourth, amplify, don't appropriate. We need to share the work, writing, and leadership of women, try to build scholarships, professional networks, and create platforms. And if there is one thing that we can do for International Women's Day this year, make it this: show up, learn, be part of the conversation. And this collective, as part of the 49% Paula, is the ideal platform, because it does not come with a defined agenda. It is not selective. Its diversity is incredible, and the women here wield power. And I'm so blessed to be part of this, and I support it 100%, because the more deeply we understand, the more responsibly we can engage. And the more responsibly we can engage, the more powerfully we can stand together, not above, not ahead, but alongside the women, transforming the Middle East from within.
Thank you. Nazleen, let me turn it over to you. I saw your hand.
I just wanted to add something quickly because, Paula, you were mentioning that many of these countries have signed on to CEDAW or other international conventions, and the fact that United Nations exists to protect some of these rights. And as many countries have signed on to the ICCPR and Convention on the Rights of the Child, and yet there's countries like Iran who, yes, they might be signatories, they might be state party to these conventions, but then they don't actually follow through. So the laws are there, but whether they're actually enforcing these laws is another thing. I mean, I think Raheel was mentioning that it's incumbent on us in the free world to push some of our leaders and people that have actual power in these different institutions. And if, for example, the United Nations is putting the Islamic Republic of Iran as chair of the Commission for the Status of Women, it's on us to push and say, this is ridiculous. This is a flawed system. This whole United Nations system needs to be reformed or revamped in a considerable way. So in some way, sometimes there are the laws that are written, but yet there's so much more we have to do to actually push for real change.
Thank you. Absolutely. I'm going to ask Astrid one more question, and then I'm going to turn it over to the Q&A that we're starting to receive. So feel free to start typing your questions. I've already gotten a couple. And we've got about 50 people here today. So really happy to see your questions and excited that this is such a robust gathering. So Astrid, let me ask you before we turn over to other folks. What is academia's role in ensuring women's political power and strength in the region? I know you've done a lot on campuses and you're based in Boston, so you're in a space that's filled with colleges and higher education. I'd love to hear your thoughts on that.
Thank you, Paula. That's such an important question, especially during this time where we are witnessing a restructuring, a change, a shift in the Middle East in so many ways, not only politically, but geographically, and in so many ways. So academia, you mentioned I live in Boston next to Cambridge. We have several Ivy Leagues, Harvard, MIT, schools around me. But academia in America is very different to academia in the Middle East. As you know, I have Lebanese background, and we've been fortunate in Lebanon that we've had many very highly accredited organizations and academic institutions like AUB, so many colleges in Lebanon and schools as well. I want to give you the example of a friend of mine. Her name is Nada Baraki. Nada is an attorney. Nada is she's an activist for women empowerment. And she just started, it's funny that we're having this conversation because she just started a satellite courses throughout Lebanon in several schools in Lebanon where the main purpose is to empower women, teach them the legal system, teach them how to utilize their legal system in their advantage, not in their advantage, but for whatever purpose they need to. I really give them a lot of credit. I give her now a lot of credit for the work that she's doing. But academia depends in the Middle East, depends on where the country where the schools, where the colleges function. They're very important for not only for women empowerment, but also for advocacy. Why? Because today data is so important, and people look at data to really sometimes to really understand what's truly going on in terms of women's rights and women participation in society, women participation in a political process. So the teaching of data within the Middle Eastern school is of extreme importance for women because it allows the world to see the numbers of what's truly going on in terms of women participation in society. In the field of women, peace, and security, for women to be able to participate in the legal process, they have to be educated. They have to be a sort of a background. They have to be able to attend schools and learn the basics to be able to participate in a political process. That is not provide in many Middle Eastern countries, unfortunately. So besides that, we have the academia allows them, the schools, the colleges, the educational institutes where they attend also allow them to establish networks, especially mentorship. Mentorship within Middle Eastern women is critical. It's one of the pillars. Why? Because it's very hard to find mentoring from another women in the Middle East for different reasons, because there's fear, there's maybe the family doesn't agree with what they're doing and they don't want to be mentoring other women of what they're doing. I've seen it less in Lebanon than other countries in the Middle East, but it is prominent. Unfortunately, mentorship is a critical component of academia in the Middle East. Now, there are other points here. For example, we have the academia is important for creating alternative academic pathways. Not everybody has an access to go to university. Not everybody has an access to go to school. So in restricted environments, think tanks and academic pathways are being developed to allow female researchers to grow despite gender segregated, environments or restricted access to traditional roles. When a woman has a traditional role in a specific Middle Eastern country, it's very, very difficult for her to be able to break that glass ceiling, to be able to participate in a process where she can be allowed to be educated. Now, there's challenges and areas of improvement. Despite progress, female academics in the region often face, as I said, glass ceilings. With fewer women in senior leadership positions, and they must navigate a male-dominated, sometimes patriarchal environment, which, reigns in the Middle East, in many countries in the Middle East. Now, supporting women in STEM, for instance, and leadership is critical. It's critical because we are in a century where where the science development is just moving so fast. Women to be everything that is related to STEM is critical for the women in the Middle East. While female enrollment is high, more than men, creating pathways for women to move from education to political and decision-making roles is truly essential. And we have to be bridging the gap between research and implementation. Like Nazanin said, we have the laws, but we have to implement them. No, the ones that are going to benefit women, of course. But in same case in education, ensuring that academic research on gender equality is acted upon by policymakers. We have to be embedded in the policy if we really want to see a change in the Middle East. Thank you.
Great. Thank you so much, Astrid. I appreciate that. So I'm going to start now with asking some of the questions from the chat. And this one is for Nazanin, and I'm going to read most of it so I capture the spirit. The question is, Nazanin, when you say the war on Iran is ultimately for the benefit of Iranians and will help create a new Iran, do you see any resemblance about what is being proposed now and the logic that was used to justify military intervention in Iraq? Iraq was also framed as a project of liberation, yet the outcome was prolonged instability, fragmentation, and a society still dealing with the consequences decades later. I'm just going to skip a little bit longer. Below where she says, what makes this situation fundamentally different from the trajectory Iraq ended up experiencing, and why should Iranians trust a model that has already failed?
Okay, good question. Okay, is my mic off? Yes. It's a very good question, and the answer that most Iranians are giving is that Iran is not those other Middle Eastern countries, and that this is a grassroots movement. This is something that the Iranian people have been working on for decades. It's coming from their wishes. It's not a foreign proposed or led intervention. The Iranian people, as I said, have been fighting this regime with their bare hands for decades through so many protests throughout the years, from 1999 student protests to the Green Movement, the Bloody November, of course, Women, Life, Freedom we talked about in 2022, and now this so-called Lion and Sun revolutionary movement. This is coming from the people themselves, and there is transitional governmental leaders at the ready to take over with a transitional plan. There are, of course, different segments of society, and they have different aspirations of how the transition should be led. But what unites the Iranian people is that they all want, well, I should say 80% of the 90 million people inside Iran want a complete change of regime, and they want a secular democracy. They want the rule of law. They want a constitution based on human rights. So we're all united in that way. Whereas in some other countries, maybe there wasn't that kind of unity. In some of these other Middle Eastern countries, there was more tribal divisions. The Iranian people are very nationalist people. They want a strong, united Iran. Of course, again, there's always exceptions to that rule. There are people in the country that, in some of the ethnic areas, that would prefer autonomy. But for the most part, Iranians have asked for this, and they've been working alongside one another to make it happen. I think that might be the difference.
Thank you. Thank you, Nazanin. I just want to remind everybody, I've been told people have their hands up, but we can't see that because this is a webinar format. So if you just click on the button at the bottom that says Q&A, you can type your question there and then we see them and we'll be happy to answer. So in the meantime, I want to ask Raheel, you speak about Muslim reform from within the community, but how do you respond to critics who argue that outside pressure on women's rights in Muslim majority countries can backfire and sometimes actually entrench conservative forces? And please unmute yourself first.
Thank you. Yes and no, both. So this is the reason why I work in many fields. In fact, as we were talking, I was just thinking, sometimes I think we've stretched ourselves too thin, but we have to take up these causes. There is work to be done from the outside, like the making of policy and data and statistics, which is, as Astrid said, which is absolutely urgent in the work we do. But the change has to come from within the communities. And so it's incumbent for us to have a foothold within the Muslim communities, because that is where the reform has to come. And outside voices will be disregarded. As you know, that even today, if anyone criticizes what is happening, what the regime is doing in Iran, they're called Islamophobes. Right here in Canada, there's a huge movement that says, no, Khamenei was a brave man. He was a martyr. Excuse me? Brave men and martyrs don't do what that regime did to women. And I think the women of Iran are a perfect role model for us to step out of our comfort zone. And speaking about statistics and data and the change that is necessary, I really want to mention that in the wake of the October 7th sexual violence against women, as we know, there was such a huge contradiction and, bias against this. And then an organization was created by Professor Ruth Halperin Kadari, who I believe is on this webinar. And she started the DINA project. And I work with her on that. And she brought out the statistics. And those were irrefutable. So part of the work that we have to do is make sure our facts are correct, make sure that we partner and align with groups, organizations, women who are doing this work. And of course, that stretches us very thin. But in order to bring about change, we have to step out of our comfort zone and collaborate. This is not a job for Iranian women alone. This is not. And it's a global issue of women's rights. It's a human rights issue. And if you look at that, then all of us have to morally and ethically be part of this movement.
Perfect. Thank you, Raheel. Thank you so much for bringing up that important issue. I'm getting a few more questions, so I want to go ahead and ask them. This one comes from Judith Koret Simon for Nazanin. She asks, the Iranian people is not one united nation, but many, some 20 plus different nation groups, languages, and traditions. They are not necessarily like or understand one another. Can you see their union for the common goal to achieve a free democracy?
Yes, you're absolutely right. In Iran, there's many different ethnicities. There's Kurds, Azerbaijani, Azeri Turks. There's Arab Ahwazis. There's the Baluch. There's Turkmen, and the list goes on. But we all consider ourselves Iranian, and there's a place for everybody. And I always say, yes, majority rules, which I guess the majority of Iranians are ethnic Persians, but minority rights, and that can never be excluded if we want to see a true democracy. And I think most Iranians, they're a mixture of all of these different faiths, or I should say ethnicities, and they're a mix of different faiths. There's Christians, Jews, Muslims, Zoroastrians, but together we all are Iranians, and we have a deep love of our culture, of our past. Um, and of course, these different ethnic groups have their distinct identities. They have their own mother tongue. They have their own cultural traditions, which all must be respected and included in a secular democratic Iran in the future. And I think in order to have a peaceful and stable and long-lasting transition to democracy, all of these uh, groups and perspectives need to be included before the transition. They need to be part of the transition plan. And that's why I have been stressing, because I'm an independent. I've never sided with any one political group or organization in the Iranian community. I've worked with people from right to left of the political spectrum, from monarchists to far left, and everybody in between. And so I've spoken to different people. I've worked with all these people, and what I've come to the conclusion is that if we want to have that kind of peaceful and stable transition, then we need to have a transitional council or representatives of these different groups to work together, and then that will carry us to the ballot box, where ultimately the Iranian people will make their decisions first in a referendum of what form of government they want, and then in free and fair elections for who they want to lead the country or be the head of state.
Great. Thank you so much, Nazanin. Raheel, I'm going to turn over to you. I see that we're getting close to the end of our conversation. And I know you had some final remarks you wanted to add, and then I'll wrap us up. And if we get any questions in the meantime, I'll feel free to add on. But go ahead, Raheel.
Thank you. This has really been inspiring. What I wanted to say is that, I often get asked that why are you, as a Muslim woman, Pakistani-born Muslim woman, so concerned about what's happening to Jewish women and Iranian women and Afghan women? The point is that when we take up this cause as human rights activists and women's rights activists, I think the power to speak for each other is very, very important. It's urgent. I've always felt that, we have to speak for those who don't have a voice, or even those who have a voice but come from a different perspective. We need to stand up for them, because this is not my fight alone. And I often say, to all the women in the world, that your struggle is my struggle. Your battle is my battle. When you win, it gives me great pleasure. And your pain is my pain. So that is the platform from which I work. And it has been very, very inspiring, the kind of feedback that I've received. And I think more people need to do that. It's not just about my battle. It's about all of us together, because this is something that we have to hold hands and move forward.
Thank you so much, Raheel. Astrid, I did get just one more question for you if you want to answer in just a couple minutes' time. The question is, Lebanon has experienced both democratic moments and deep institutional collapse. What lessons from Lebanon's civil society, especially from women-led movements, do you think are transferable to countries like Iran or Afghanistan at this moment of transition?
The lessons are courage, endurance, patience. The women of Lebanon are truly extraordinary. I don't know how they do it, frankly. They could be bombs which are taken right now, falling in Beirut, and the women are somewhere else meeting at a conference, or they just won't give up. It's the endurance that these women have, the courage, the will to live. It's really remarkable. And it's just not the Lebanese, it's the Iranian women. I mean, look at what they have accomplished. Every single member of every family has lost a relative, or the entire family. And these women keep fighting for their rights. Same with the Lebanese women. The situation right now in Iran, in Lebanon, is a testament of the strength, the courage, and the will to live of the Middle Eastern women. And I cannot say enough, Paula. And I think that's the secret. That's the secret mix there. They just won't give up. They won't give up. They want to live, they want to thrive, they want to raise good children, and they want to keep standing up and supporting their families. Thank you.
Thank you, Astrid. I'm just gonna mention again that beautiful comment Raheel said, courage is the currency of reform. And I think one thing I really want to underscore before we wrap up today is how critical it is. If all of you on this call have been inspired by what you've seen, I really encourage you to stay involved with our organization, the 49%, but also the other organizations represented here, Empower Women Media, Rahil's organization, the Council for Muslims Facing Tomorrow, Nazanin, Stop Child Executions, and the Abrahamic Women's Council. We also, many of us are part of an incredible organization called Women Champions for Change. And regardless if it's these organizations or others, please, as these conflicts continue in the next several days or weeks, as we see a real changing of the guard, I want to please ask each of you from the bottom of my heart to be very critical in the types of media that you consume, and B, make sure that you're listening to women on the ground, civil society members, those of us who have been part of this fight, not just for years or weeks, but for decades. And so I really encourage you to amplify those voices, amplify the voices of courage, but amplify the voices of nuance. The women who are saying that we'll sit in a room with pretty much anyone. We're here because we want a new paradigm for our children. We're here because we know that there's a better tomorrow. And we're determined to make sure that women's voices are at the forefront of these new conversations. So I'll say it again, I am deeply optimistic. I think there's no other way to be. I want to mention that our incredible partners, WCC Women Champions for Change, I just want to make sure I get the information correct. They're actually holding another webinar next week, exactly a week from now on the 12th. And the title is Women, Voice, and Narrative, Storytelling as Leadership in the MENA region, Middle East and North Africa. And at this webinar, we'll also hear from Palestinians, Jews, Muslims, and Christians. These are content creators who are using their voices to create change in the Middle East. So we'll make sure as partners with WCC to send you that information. I personally am very thrilled to mention that we have three major faiths represented on this call and three continents or three countries as well. So this is a joy. I'm so grateful to each of you, Astrid, Nazanin, Raheel. And you'll all be getting an email. So you'll be able to watch the recording of this. You'll get to know more about our organization, the 49%, and you'll also have details about next week's webinar. So please join me in staying optimistic, staying connected to women's rights leaders, to praying for a speedy peace and a new day ahead of us in this region and for the entire world. Thank you so much for being part of this. Until the next time, take care.